Hello and welcome to this special year-ender episode of World at War. My name is Mohammed Saleh. There are decades when nothing happens, and then there are weeks when decades happen. This quote by Vladimir Lenin rings true for the year 2025. The Russia-Ukraine war has exposed the limitations of the NATO military alliance, which interestingly happens to be the world's strongest military alliance in human history. Donald Trump, the President of the United States of America, a nation that calls itself the leader of the free world, hasn't minced his words when talking about Europe. In fact, the White House Security and Strategy document describes Europe to be undergoing civilizational erasure. Now, Trump's repeated rant that Europe should pay for its own defenses means that nations that earlier relied on American security umbrella have been left exposed. Nations like Germany and Japan have heightened their military spending. America under Donald Trump, which appears to be limping more and more towards a Monroe Doctrine-dictated worldview, means that Pax Americana that emerged after the Second World War is showing some very visible cracks. There is a subtle but a steady march towards militarization. In this special edition of World at War, that is focused on the theme of militarization, we tell you about the conflicts that define 2025 and, more importantly, about the fault lines that could erupt in 2026. Is Pax Americana ending? Not since the end of the Second World War have we witnessed as many wars and conflicts as we are witnessing at this moment. In 2025, according to the Global Peace Index, there are a total of 78 countries that are involved in pitched border conflicts, civil wars, and fighting insurgencies. Much of the world's attention has been fixated on the Russia-Ukraine war that has continued to drag on into its fourth year. Russia's progress has been slow in this meat grinder. Every street, neighborhood, town and city has been contested. Backed by weapons supplied by the United States, Ukraine has put up a dogged resistance. But the writing is on the wall. In this most high-tech weapons contest in human history so far, Russia against the odds has managed to establish what is effectively a once-in-a-century moment. Russia is the most dominant military power in Europe, and other European capitals, without the backing of the United States, militarily will not be able to match up to Moscow. The Israeli onslaught on the Gaza Strip has been condemned as a genocide by the United Nations. More than 70,000 Palestinians have been killed, an overwhelming majority of whom are women and young children. Over 90% of all buildings have been bombed and destroyed by Israel, using bombs supplied by the United States and other Western powers. More than 58% of the Gaza Strip has been occupied by Israel, and the Israeli Defense Minister has made it clear that Tel Aviv has no intention of returning the occupied land to the Palestinians. To the north of Israel, in Lebanon, despite a ceasefire, Israel has continued with its repeated attacks on the premise that it is cracking down on Hezbollah targets. More than 300 Lebanese nationals have been killed by Israel in this ceasefire. Besides Lebanon, Israel has also trained its guns on Syria. The image of Benjamin Netanyahu at Syria's Mount Hermon had sparked controversy, and Netanyahu wants Syria to demilitarize all the way from Damascus to Mount Hermon and the Israeli border for peace. Another area of conflict with the Houthis still persists. The Red Sea corridor that was effectively shut by the Houthis in solidarity with the Palestinians who were under the pump by Israel has cautiously reopened. But major carriers haven't gone back to the pre-crisis volumes. The bruising contest between the Sudanese National Army and the RSF has created the world's worst current humanitarian crisis. More than 9.3 million people are internally displaced, with more than 4.3 million people reported to have fled Sudan altogether. The RSF has intensified its attacks on Kordofan, while a senior military commander of the Sudanese army has said that there will be no negotiations with the paramilitary force. The Sudanese civil war shows all the signs that it will continue to grind on in 2026. The M23 rebels, with the backing of Rwanda, has captured large swathes of territory in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And despite signing a framework for peace in Doha, the M23 rebels have shown no inclination to withdraw from the key territories that they've captured in eastern Congo. And even the United States, which played a key role in mediation, has little faith that this tenuous ceasefire will hold in this mineral-rich part of the world, which despite the abundance of mineral riches is racked by war, displacement and poverty. The military junta has repeatedly carried out airstrikes on the rebels in different parts of Myanmar. The Myanmar junta at the moment controls only about 21% of the territory, while the rebels, who have managed to get an upper hand in the conflict, currently control almost 40% of the territory, while the rest is still contested. Thailand and Cambodia have entered into another period of uneasy truce. For more than a century, Thailand and Cambodia have contested sovereignty at various undemarcated points along their 817-kilometer-long land border, a dispute that has occasionally exploded into skirmishes and fighting. More than 100 people have been killed and over 500,000 people have been displaced, and this remains a region that could again flare up in 2026. The United States has surrounded the Venezuelan shoreline with the biggest and the most powerful naval armada in the region. The Venezuelan airspace has been shut and an effective naval blockade has been imposed. The United States has also captured what it describes as sanctioned Venezuelan oil tankers at a time when they were fully loaded. Under the premise of cracking down on narco-trafficking, Washington has repeatedly bombed boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific, killing more than 100 people. And the United States is now threatening a potential ground operation in Venezuela. After the humiliating war that Pakistan fought with India as part of Operation Sindhu, Rawalpindi is again waking up to a whole new security reality. The Taliban is using the Pakistani playbook of backing the proxy outfit of the Pakistani Taliban to stage attack after attack on Pakistani soil. More than 1,188 incidents of violence, including terror attacks, have been reported in Pakistan in 2025. Pakistan's old strategy of bleed by 1,000 cuts is being used on its own soil, and the Durand line that separates Afghanistan from Pakistan has again come alive, with repeated skirmishes between Pakistan and Afghanistan which are expected to continue well into 2026.
Faithfully execute. That I will faithfully execute.
A month after Donald Trump assumed the presidency of the United States for the second time on the 20th of January, he took aim at Europe, saying that the war in Ukraine is far more important to Europe than it is to the United States, further emphasizing that there is a big, beautiful ocean between them. The shift in the American foreign policy towards Ukraine in particular and Europe in general was crystal clear. On the 14th of February, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, while addressing the Munich Security Conference, had adopted the same stance, saying that Europe must bolster its own defenses to allow Washington to focus on threats in the rest of the globe.
We think it's an important part of being in a shared alliance together that the Europeans step up while America focuses on areas of the world that are in great danger.
The American mood was more than evident in a stunning row that blew up in the Oval Office, where Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, in full public view, scolded Zelensky, accusing him of not being thankful for U.S. help in the 3-year war.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
That's exactly
Remember
what
this.
you're doing.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
You will feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
not
cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't.
You're
playing cards. You're playing cards.
Serious.
You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country, that's back to you, far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Noteworthy is the fact that withdrawing U.S. troops from Europe has been a particularly staunch demand of the MAGA right. Washington soon began deprioritizing issues and missions abroad in a bid to concentrate on domestic security and its immediate neighborhood. The U.S. naval buildup in the Caribbean, the largest in more than 30 years, underscored this shift. To put things into perspective, between the Russian invasion of Ukraine in Feb 2022 and the end of 2024, the United States was the biggest national contributor, accounting for nearly half of the military aid to Ukraine. With Washington making it abundantly clear that the security of Europe was no longer the first priority of the United States, Europe was left facing a future without America's nuclear umbrella, which protected them throughout the Cold War and in the decades since. France and the United Kingdom are the only 2 countries on the European continent which have nuclear weapons. According to the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, France currently has 290 nuclear warheads, which can be fired from France-based aircraft or from submarines. Though the United Kingdom has 225 nuclear warheads, the big difference is that the French arsenal is sovereign, that is, developed entirely by France, whereas the United Kingdom relies on U.S. technical input. The French President Emmanuel Macron opened a Pandora's box by saying that he would open a debate on extending France's nuclear deterrent to other European countries in this highly uncertain new era.
Beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is there, affecting the countries of Europe, affecting us. Russia has already turned the Ukrainian conflict into a global one, mobilizing North Korean soldiers and Iranian equipment on our continent, while helping these countries to further arm themselves. It would be madness to remain a spectator in this world of danger. Without further delay, we must make decisions for Ukraine, for the security of the French, for the security of Europeans. I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection by our deterrence of our allies on the European continent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, who is the head of the armed forces.
Moscow labeled Macron's comment about extending France's nuclear deterrent to other European countries as a threat. The German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, evinced interest, saying that it might be an opportune moment for discussion with Paris and London on the subject. Germany cannot acquire its own nuclear weapons without violating an international treaty on non-proliferation of which it is a signatory. Things came to fruition in July when the Northwood Declaration between Paris and London established that the alliance is not merely a strategic nuclear signaling but a recalibration of posture and arsenal. The big question is, will this strategic alliance prove a deterrent for Russia, the nation with most nuclear weapons?
Defeated and humbled in the aftermath of World War II, Germany now finds itself at the heart of a sweeping military transformation. From decades of post-war atonement and pacifism, Germany has been jolted to the new geopolitical reality. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has exposed the limitations of NATO's defense capabilities and has exposed the German war machine. This has forced Berlin into a rapid and costly rearmament exercise. American support for Europe's security is increasingly growing uncertain. The German military, also known as the Bundeswehr, currently has over 182,000 soldiers. German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius aims to expand the force to 260,000 strong by 2035. The German Navy operates 65 naval vessels, including 11 frigates, 5 corvettes, and 6 submarines. The German Air Force can field 240 combat jets with 138 Eurofighter Typhoons, as well as more than 100 helicopters and a range of transport aircraft. The arsenal also includes the Patriot and Iris-T air defense systems and a limited number of Taurus cruise missiles. Germany's ambitious new defense spending will fund 320 projects across land, air, sea, cyber, and space. Berlin's defense spending is set to double to 162 billion or 3.5% of GDP by 2029, from the current 86 billion that will be spent this year. Europe, led by Germany, the UK, and France, is preparing to fill roles the US might leave in NATO. Analysts estimate Europe will need to spend an additional 125 billion annually if the US withdraws, and Germany is expected to provide half of that through higher defense spending. US troop drawdowns on NATO's eastern flank, such as in Romania, have raised concerns among allies. US President Trump has called for higher defense spending from Europe and set a 2027 deadline for a Europe-led NATO. The Biden administration had reduced funding for Baltic states and signaled possible troop withdrawals. While over 100,000 US troops remain in Europe, some rotations are ending, creating concerns about maintaining deterrence against Russia. Eastern allies like Poland and Romania are worried about their own security if US support weakens. High-ranking German officials warn that Russia may test NATO's resolve as soon as 2028. Berlin's new defense plan is designed to move large numbers of NATO troops across German territory if needed. Germany remains committed to collective defense in NATO and the European Union, not seeking to act alone. The Bundeswehr is working to modernize, adding new fighter jets, expanding naval capacity, and updating air defense and artillery systems. The next few years will show whether Germany can meet these challenges and help ensure Europe's security if US support declines. Russia's war in Ukraine and China's growing belligerence is rewriting the global world order. Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi, described as Japan's Iron Lady for her hardline views, has delivered a stark warning. She has declared that any Chinese use of force or a naval blockade against Taiwan could constitute a survival-threatening situation for Japan. The question now is Prime Minister Takaichi preparing her nation for a potential military confrontation with China? The country is moving swiftly to strengthen its military capabilities, rearming at a pace unseen in decades. The Japanese military currently has a headcount of 247,000 active personnel. On land, the troops are backed by 521 tanks and more than 707 artillery guns. The missile arsenal is formidable with advanced Patriot PAC-3 and Aegis defense systems. Japan is also investing in next-generation hypersonic weapons. At sea, the Japanese Navy commands 155 vessels, including 2 Izumo-class helicopter carriers, 36 destroyers, 22 submarines, and 8 frigates. Its arsenal features over 1,000 anti-ship missiles, including the domestically produced Type 12s and US-made Harpoons. Tokyo is also preparing to raise its defense budget to an unprecedented $70 billion, amounting to 2% of GDP, from its current spending of $58 billion that has been earmarked for this year. This landmark move marks a departure from decades of restraint, signaling a new era for Japan's national military spending. For decades, Japan kept its military power tightly constrained through its pacifist constitution. Japanese Constitution's Article 9 explicitly renounces war, restricting the country's armed forces to a strictly defensive role. Japan also stands firm on its three non-nuclear principles. So, it does not possess, produce, or allow nuclear weapons on its soil. This further solidifies its reputation as a nation devoted to peace, but things are now changing. Since the US-Japan Security Treaty of 1960, Washington has provided Tokyo with state-of-the-art weaponry from F-35 fighter jets to Aegis destroyers. The US maintains its largest overseas military presence in Japan, with 55,000 troops stationed at more than 120 sites, including major bases like Yokosuka Naval Base and Misawa Air Base. Okinawa alone is home to about 32,000 of these troops, but Tokyo is charting a path toward greater self-reliance. Growing uncertainty over the extent of American support in the event of direct conflict with China is prompting Japan to rethink its security calculus. The United States remains both an ally and an arms supplier, but it has at times sidelined Tokyo, like negotiating directly with Beijing and urging Japan to shoulder more of the costs for US forces stationed on its soil. On December 18th, when the United States announced a record $11.1 billion arms deal with Taiwan, Beijing responded with sharp condemnation, demanding an immediate end to what it calls US provocations.
On the 13th of June, just 2 days ahead of a planned sixth round of nuclear negotiations between Tehran and Washington, Israel launched an unprecedented bombing campaign against Iran, including on its nuclear and military sites, triggering a war which killed more than 1,000 people, including senior commanders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards Corps, nuclear scientists, and civilians. In retaliation to the Israeli attack, Iran launched missile and drone strikes that killed dozens in Israel. On the 22nd of June, the United States joined the war by bombing the three Iranian nuclear facilities of Natanz, Fordow, and Isfahan, thereby derailing the nuclear talks between Tehran and Washington that had begun in April. A tenuous ceasefire has been in place between Iran and Israel since the 24th of June. Since the 12-day war in June, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has repeatedly claimed that the U.S. strikes obliterated Iran's nuclear program, but the full extent of the damage remains shrouded in mystery. According to the Pentagon, the strikes effectively delayed Iran's nuclear program by between 1 and 2 years. In October, Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei rebuffed the American president's claims and questioned his right to decide what Iran should or shouldn't have.
The US president boasts that he has destroyed Iran's nuclear industry. That's fine. Keep dreaming. But who are you to say what a country should or shouldn't have if it possesses a nuclear industry?
A little over 5 months later, revival of nuclear talks between Tehran and Washington is still in the realm of uncertainty, with a major stumbling block being uranium enrichment on Iranian soil. Western powers want the practice eliminated to minimize the risk of weaponization, something which Tehran has firmly rejected. On Tuesday, the United States and Iran traded barbs at the United Nations Security Council over conditions for reviving nuclear talks. Iran's ballistic missile program, according to Iranian officials, is its main form of deterrence, something which should be prioritized along with drone capabilities to counter superior capabilities of the United States and Israel, estimated at over 3,000 missiles, including short, medium, and long-range types like the Ahmad, Ghadr, Khorramshahr, and Sijil. Iran possesses West Asia's largest and most diverse ballistic missile arsenal. Last week, NBC News had reported that Israel is planning to prepare for possible new military action against Iran, aimed at pressuring Tehran into negotiations over expansion of its ballistic missile program. On Monday, calling Iran's missile program non-negotiable, Iranian Foreign Ministry spokesperson reiterated that the program has been developed to defend the country's sovereignty.
Iran's missile program has been developed to solely defend the country's sovereignty and is basically not a subject of negotiation. It is evident that Iran is fully committed to doing its job. The Iranian armed forces are capable of making every effort to defend the country when necessary.
The Iranian spokesperson also slammed West's hypocrisy regarding Iran's missile capabilities. On one hand, Israel and the Western powers are leaving no stone unturned to present Iran's missile program as a threat, while on the other, large quantities of arms are being delivered to Israel by these very Western powers. On the 9th of September, the Israeli military had bombed the Qatari capital city of Doha, targeting senior Hamas leaders. The unprecedented bombing fundamentally changed the security calculus in West Asia, jolting the Gulf nations out of their slumber and shattering forever the myth of their perceived security, which for long was dependent on the United States. Barely a week after, on the 17th of September, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia signed a new strategic defense pact, giving rise to speculation that Riyadh will have a de facto nuclear shield under the agreement. While few details of the pact were revealed, analysts are of the opinion that Israel, which has never confirmed or denied possessing nuclear weapons, will be watching the developments closely. In the past, Saudi Arabia has said that if rival Iran acquired nuclear weapons, it too would follow. Which brings us back to the all-important question: given the turbulent history between Tehran and Tel Aviv, who will win the next war, the signs for which are ominous.